Hello guys and welcome to Coin Engineers. So Israel just attacked Iran with missile launches and I want to talk about how this could potentially affect the crypto markets. Before that, I want to bring attention to a few other things like the CPI data and what has been happening in the headlines. So let's jump straight into it. So before we get into the heated debate about what is going on in the Middle East, I want to quickly bring the attention to the CPI data and what this means, because I see a lot of people talking about a possible Fed rate cut coming. However, a lot of market experts are saying otherwise. When we look at some of the headlines, we can see that today's CPI inflation data won't have much impact on next week's Federal Reserve meeting, in which markets see zero chance of a rate cut. However, CPI and producer index data out today and tomorrow may influence updated Fed policymaker projections for inflation and interest rates that will be issued next Wednesday. Which means that we are still yet to see some data coming out in the next days that might potentially change Fed's decision making in the interest rate cuts. And when we look at the Fed rate cut odds, markets still see zero chance of a rate cut at the June 18 Fed meeting. Odds of a rate cut on July 30 nudged up to 16% from 14.5% after the CPI inflation data. For the September 17 meeting, however, odds of a rate cut now stands at 70%, up from 60% before the inflation report. The good news is that odds of a 50 basis points cuts for the full year rose to 72% from 59%. This means that on the short term, we might not really be seeing a rate cut coming in this month. However, in the coming months, we might potentially start seeing a rate cut. Overall, the market is not looking very certain, and it is probably best to wait what happens with the upcoming data and to see if that will potentially change any of the odds for Fed's decision making into the upcoming interest rate cuts. The only thing left to shift the markets right now is some sort of a cultural shift that happens within Bitcoin, where people are adding Bitcoin to their portfolios to fight against inflation. And we see a lot of this happening, as Michael Saylor says, if every millionaire in the world bought one Bitcoin, there won't be enough of it, and we might see some sort of a supply shock happening. For instance, Paul Tudor Jones, who's worth around $8 billion and pioneered the entire modern hedge fund industry, going on Bloomberg and saying that Bitcoin is probably part of your best portfolio to fight against inflation. And there's a lot of big investors that are now eyeing Bitcoin to add to their portfolios to fight against inflation, alongside with gold. So I think the most important thing here is once we start seeing that cultural shift happening with Bitcoin, then we will start to see a major shift happening into crypto. Another thing that caught my eye was that Coinbase announced 4% Bitcoin back on their credit cards. And I think they're partnering up with American Express on this as the issuer. I think this is very important for the crypto space because it is showing that more banks and institutions are coming into the space and that crypto is here to stay. Coming into the Israel news, we saw over $1 billion of liquidations in the crypto markets as Israel launched a strike on Iran. This did come in much sooner than we expected. We were reading news around nuclear strikes against Iran, and now we are reading about how Israel has already struck, now preparing to defend themselves. Overall, things are not looking great on the short term, and we are looking at the news with the CPI data and the Israel and Iran conflicts going on for the crypto markets. However, I do want to add that last time this happened between Ukraine and Russia conflict, we did see similar action in the crypto markets, followed up by a massive surge in the upcoming weeks, and potentially we could see something similar to that again. Alright guys, so that's all I had for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.